Next weekend is one of my favorite weekends of the entire year. Myself and my team every year in July host something that we call the 24 Hours of Tapping. It is a 24-hour live stream on YouTube where I talk to over 30 amazing tapping and transformational practitioners from all over the world. They share their wisdom absolutely free as an opportunity to raise money for this absolutely amazing organization called the Peaceful Heart Network. Now, as wonderful as this event is, and as wonderful as the weekend is, it is actually the result of a gigantic failure. Something that I tried to do that blew up spectacularly in my face. And so this week, what I want to do in the podcast is I want to talk about our relationship to failure, how that gets in our way, and most importantly, how we can transform our emotional relationship to specific failures with tapping so we can move forward and create change that we want. This is Gene Monterastelli, and welcome to the Tapping Q&A podcast, recorded live to tape from Williamsburg in Brooklyn. This is episode 618, originally aired July 3rd, 2024. Hi, everyone. I hope this finds you well wherever you are and whatever time of day you're getting a chance to listen to this. Thanks for spending a little time with me today. Failure sucks. We are in a circumstance where we invest time and effort and energy into something only to fall short or to have it blow up in our face. And when we fail, not only does it feel like a giant waste of time and energy, if it's something that we do in a public way, we're afraid that we're going to be judged. And in the work that I do with my clients, we tap on past failure, preventing them from taking current action, probably more than anything else. Because it stings so much that there's a part of us that just doesn't want to do it. You know, there's the old adage, I would rather have loved and lost than never to have loved at all. The subconscious mind doesn't think that. The subconscious mind is actually in a circumstance where it doesn't want failure. It doesn't want pain. If our subconscious mind had its way, we would actually have our entire life encased in amber and nothing would ever change because we wouldn't deal with trouble and we wouldn't deal with the pain of failure. So what I want to do is I just want to share with you my relationship to failure, how that's changed over time. And then I want to share two things with you. One is a tapping approach that you can take to help you to get past failure. And two is a question that you can ask yourself that I use all of the time to create a reframe in the moment to make it easier to navigate our way through failure. Now, before we do that, like I said, we're going to be doing a little tapping. If you are new to tapping and you don't know what I'm talking about, all you need to do is go to learntotap.com. You'll get all of the information that you need on tapping. Just follow the arrow in the upper right-hand corner. It'll take you to learntotap.com, and you can see this amazing tool in action so you can start using it every day. The 24 hours of tapping was not something that I was trying to create. It was actually my second choice in trying to solve a problem. And so what I want to do is I just want to give you a little history about how I landed there through the lens of failure so we can see what it's like to transform that and approach things in new ways. So leading up to the last men's soccer World Cup, it was held in Qatar. And because it was held in Qatar, there were a number of stories about the constructions of the stadiums and the condition those stadiums were constructed in. Qatar is not a natural soccer power. So in order to host this amazing international global experience, they had to build 10 new stadiums to host the tournament. Now, Qatar has some very unique work practices, particularly when it comes to bringing in workers from outside of the country. If you work in Qatar as a foreign national, you have to give your passport to your boss, which means you cannot change jobs and you cannot go home without your boss's permission. Now, you can imagine the types of trouble and complications that can provide for migrant workers who are going to a difficult place to build stadiums outdoors in one of the hottest places on the planet. And so about 2 years before the tournament, leading up to the tournament, there was lots of conversations about what was going on in the country and was it ethical and right to be holding the tournament in this particular location. There was a Norwegian labor journalist who published a story And one thing you need to understand is there is a tradition in soccer or football, as they would refer to it in other parts of the world, in which you will have a minute of silence for remembrance. So, for example, if a player from your team from the past has passed away in old age and they wore the number 15, during the next match, at the 15th minute, for 1 minute, the crowd will be completely silent as a way of honoring and remembering. Regardless what's going on in the field, they hold that moment of silence in play. And so, since this is a tradition, this Norwegian journalist noted that, and this was 2 years before the tournament had happened, so construction was still happening. And the journalist said if there was 1 minute of silence for every single person who had died while these stadiums were being built, the first 23 games would have been held in silence. Those are 90-minute games, 1 minute in silence for every single person. By the time the tournament actually started, if you had 1 minute of silence for every person who died in the building of those stadiums, the entire tournament, over 60 games, would have been played in absolute silence. And so as this was going on, I was having conversations with two of my friends who are both really, really big international soccer fans like myself, and are both people like myself who are very much driven by social justice and wanting the world to be a better place. And so the conversation that we were having in our little soccer chat on our text message thread was, is it ethical and is it right for us to watch this tournament? Because the tournament was happening with this particular consequence. And as I thought about it, I realized that if I boycotted the tournament, nothing would change. If I didn't watch the games, no change would happen in the world. If I didn't buy Adidas or Coca-Cola or Budweiser or anything from any of the title sponsors, if I didn't do that, nothing was actually going to change. And I also recognized the fact that it was going to be very difficult for me to convince anybody in my life to do the exact same thing. And even if every single person I knew made the decision not to watch the tournament or not to support those sponsors, no change would come from that. And so in response to that, I wanted to do something that was more proactive. Instead of avoiding something that might be unethical, what was something that we could do that would make a difference? And so I created a plan, and it was going to be a plan in which I was going to be encouraging people all over the world in their local communities to find organizations that serve immigrants and refugees and donate some time. Teach English, help them out, do something like that. And I had this spectacular plan. I even worked with a computer scientist friends of mine, and we figured out how to build this digital infrastructure to support something like this and how it would be replicated and all of that sort of stuff. And then at a certain point, I just realized unless someone was just going to write a check for $200,000 to support me in this effort, it wasn't something that I was going to be able to do and to maintain and support everything else in my life. Like if it was my full-time job, I might be able to pull it off. But just on the side as a hustle, there was no way that was going to happen. So it was a giant failure. I had invested time, I had invested energy, I had invested some money into something that wasn't going to work and wasn't going to make a difference. But then I asked myself the question, okay, if I can't do that, what is something that I can do? And at this point, I was aware of the Peaceful Heart Network. The Peaceful Heart Network provides tapping resources to over 300,000 refugees and immigrants in over 20 countries, in war-torn places, in jails, in just some of the most amazing places in the world. So I reached out to the Peaceful Heart Network and I thought, what's something that I could do to support you? I know we'll do a fundraiser. And growing up in the United States, being the age that I am, I can remember the old Jerry Lewis telethon where they would go on television for 72 hours to raise money for the March of Dimes. And I thought, I'm going to do that. I'm going to do a live stream and I'm going to encourage people to donate money. And so as we head into July 2024, we're having the opportunity to host it for the third time. We've raised over $70,000 up to this point, and real change has happened in the world. And that real change that has happened in the world, where thousands of people from around the world join us for the live stream, where tens of thousands of dollars have been raised that go directly to supporting people in some of the hardest places in the world to have this amazing tool set that is happening, is all a consequence of a giant failure. Because the 24 hours of tapping is something that is so much smaller than the thing I wanted to do. The 24 hours of tapping is having a much smaller impact than I originally envisioned. But that doesn't diminish its impact. And that doesn't diminish its value. And that doesn't diminish the effort that my team and our other volunteers put in and all the work the speakers put in to make it happen. And it doesn't diminish the transformation that is a direct consequence of that particular event. And so that particular event was born out of a spectacular failure. Now, it could have been really easy for me after having this grand plan, and I told this plan to lots of people, and I invited people to help me out, that I could have been in a circumstance in that moment of failure to have been really hurt and to be really wounded. And don't get me wrong, I was disappointed. I was hurt. I was embarrassed because I talked about this really cool thing that I wanted to create that didn't happen. But instead of staying in that failure, I took those emotions, I felt those emotions, I tapped on those emotions, and as I tapped on those emotions, what I found was still a desire to make a difference. And what I found was lessons that I learned by biting off way more than I could chew so that I could create something that was valuable. So what I want to share with you is 2 really simple ways that you can respond when you are experiencing failure so that you don't become stuck, so you don't become scared, so you don't stay in a place, but you can actually move forward. And so those 2 tools are, number 1, I want to share a question with you. And number 2, we're going to do some tapping. And so the question is this. Well, let me frame the question first. As I look back on my experience, the fact that I failed trying to do something really big turned out to be something really good for me. Because what it did is it created the space and it created emotional investment and it created me doing research to understand a problem deeper, and it helped me to understand the place that I could actually make change. And so there's so many lessons from failures. And I'd be willing to bet in your life, there have been times where you have failed, where when you look back on it, or there have been times where things didn't go as planned or things didn't work out, and you look back on it and you go, wow, at the moment that really, really sucked. But boy, is it an amazing gift that is making it easier for me because these are the lessons I learned. These are the consequences. And I'm not saying that all failure have lessons and all failure is great, but I'd be willing to bet there are some failures in your past that you look back on and you think that's a really good thing. So the question I like to ask myself when something goes wrong is, I'm going to imagine it's 1 year from today. And 1 year from today, if I am looking backwards, what would have to happen over the course of the next year where this failure is actually the best thing that ever happened to me? Because when we look back, like I just said, when we look back, we're like, oh my gosh, that thing going wrong was actually a really good thing because. And so by pushing myself into the future and asking myself the question, what would have to happen to me getting to that point in the future where as I look back, this was actually a really good thing? What I'm doing is I am future casting the lessons and the insights from this particular moment. Now, when I do that, I am rarely right. When I do that, I'm not actually predicting the future and saying what's going on, but it immediately provides a reframe for me. As things are blowing up around me, as I'm experiencing these things, I'm asking myself the question just to imagine, how might this actually be a good thing? And I'm not asking, and notice it, I'm not asking about how can this be a good thing right now? Because right now it is not a good thing. Right now it is painful. Right now it sucks. Right now it's overwhelming. Right now it is disappointing. But instead, by going into the future, I'm giving myself the opportunity to artificially create a space of perspective on this particular moment. And for me, what that does is that starts to change my disposition. It starts to change the way I am in the moment. And it starts to go, oh, and I start to already recognize lessons that are inside of that. So that's number one. Number two is I tap. And I tap and I tap and I tap and I tap, because simply asking that reframing question does not alleviate the sting in the moment. It does not make things magically work out. It does not make the embarrassment immediately go away of publicly proclaiming something and failing. Instead, it's an opportunity for me to learn, but I also need to be dealing with the emotions. And so when I am experiencing a moment of failure, the tapping I am doing is the exact opposite of that question. The tapping I'm doing is not trying to get insight. It's not trying to get reframes. It's not trying to change my disposition. Instead, the tapping is just giving myself permission to acknowledge all of the emotions I am feeling. Fully articulated emotions are short-lived. And so when I am experiencing an entire constellation of negative emotions from failure, they're churning and it's hard for me to get a handle on it. And like people are trying to give me advice. Oh, Gene, it's going to be great. That question I just shared with you is about making it great. But I need to deal with and I need to respond to the emotions. And so what we're going to do is we're going to do a little tapping right now. I want you to take a nice big deep breath. And as you do that, if it's safe and it's comfortable for you right now to tap along with me, tap on the side of the hand, take another nice big deep breath. And what I want you to do is I just want you to imagine a time in the past, maybe it's the recent past, maybe it's the distant past where there's a failure, that there's still some sting associated with that failure. And all I want you to do is I just want you to move from tapping point to tapping point, repeating after me. And if you can do it out loud, I would encourage you to do it. Tap in the order that makes the most sense for you. I recognize the fact that I have failed. And because I have failed, I am experiencing a lot of negative emotions. I'm feeling grief for the opportunity that has been lost. I'm feeling disappointment for the way that I've acted. I'm feeling embarrassed because I failed in a way that others have seen. I feel like I've let myself down. I feel like I've let others down. I feel like I have proven to myself once again that I am a failure. Not just that I have failed, but I am a failure. And there is a part of me that believes that if I beat myself up in this way, all of a sudden, I will become a better human. I will make better choices, and I will be successful. The emotions that I'm feeling right now are about acknowledging what has been lost and trying to scold me into better. And I know scolding does not make me make better choices. And so I give myself permission to hear and feel all of these negative emotions. To hear and feel all of the pain. Because that part of me just wants better. But I also recognize the fact this failure was a moment. This failure was an experience. This failure impacts my life. But even though that is the case, I might have failed, but I am not a failure. It is not my identity. It is not who I am. It is an experience that has real consequences. But even though it is an experience with real consequences, it does not define me. It defines this moment. It defines where I stand. But it does not define me. I give all of the pain and disappointment and anguish and embarrassment permission to be heard, to be understood, and to be released. Mistakes and failures impact me, but they do not define me. And I'm allowed to act again. Nice big deep breath. It is so valuable for us to just lean in and feel the emotions, to be present to those particular things. And if you do that, if the emotion is still burbling up, go back to the beginning of that tap along. Tap on it again, tap on it again, tap on it again. Give all of the pain permission to be heard. It is no fun to feel the pain. I know, I hate it. It's pain. We don't want to be in pain. But just because that's the case, it doesn't mean we have to live there. So those are some reflections and some thoughts and some reframes around this idea of failure. You are going to experience failure unless you wrap yourself in bubble wrap and never get out of your bed. Because as we step into the world, we're engaging with things we don't control. We share the planet with almost 8 billion other people who have free will, who are inconsistent, who are fickle, who impact our lives. And sometimes we make mistakes. Sometimes things don't go as planned. Sometimes we miss things. So failure is going to be an inevitable part of our lives, especially if we're on the leading edge, we're trying to grow, we're trying to transform. So hopefully that question of a reframe and that tapping is something that is useful for you. If you know someone in your life who could appreciate something like this, please be our ambassador. Pass it along. Don't spam your inbox and send it to everybody in the world, but you might know 1 or 2 people who would really appreciate something like this today. And the beautiful thing is, even if they don't listen to this and tap along to this, the fact you've reached out and said, I'm thinking of you today, this will make your day better, it will make their day better. It's as cheesy as I can be, but it is also something that is super, super true. So reach out. Tell someone you're thinking about them today. On the screen right now, you can see a playlist of all of the podcasts that we have here on YouTube. Click on that playlist, dive in. There are hundreds of hours of free content waiting for you, and I look forward to talking to you and tapping with you again real soon. Bye-bye.